Behavior Guidance, Part 3.4. Continuing on with our outline, we are now wrapping up how do we promote functional behaviors. Remembering that we first look at the environment to make any changes in that before trying to change the child themselves. Within the environment, we have looked at the physical layout, our program schedule, the curriculum we offer, ourselves, and now we are going to look at specific guidance strategies that we can use with children. Before we dive into the strategies, we need to remember that every child has unique needs. Consequently, no single guidance strategy will be appropriate for all children at all times. I wish that I could give you a book A to Z of every behavior, and when that behavior pops up, you find it, and therefore you have your answer right then and there like a dictionary. But unfortunately, that's not how child guidance works. That's not how positive child guidance works. And that's just not how children work in general either. So what are some specific guidance strategies that we can do? Well, this first one may not actually seem like a guidance strategy, but it really is. And that is to ignore mildly annoying behavior as long as that mildly annoying behavior is not against the ground rules. Remembering that all of our programs have set rules or expectations that protect the individual rights of children, protecting them, teaching them to be healthy, to be respectful, and so on. And if they are not violating those expectations or those rules, their behavior isn't necessarily dysfunctional or inappropriate. It's just bugging us for whatever reason in that moment. We find it annoying, or maybe another student finds it annoying. However, a guidance strategy in that moment can be to ignore that behavior. The child may have a mistaken goal, which they are trying to get attention by doing this annoying behavior that isn't really against the ground rules. So not only can you as the adult focus your attention elsewhere, but you can also try to discreetly redirect that annoying behavior to a more positive substitute behavior. This can be through discussion. This can be through actually pointing out or actually saying, I would like you to do this instead, or hey, what about that over there? That looks interesting, to get them to move on from that behavior without really acknowledging it. If you do outright acknowledge the behavior with the individual student, that's not horrible either. Again, have a discussion about it. Talk about why you believe it's annoying and what you hope and want them to do differently. Again, remembering though that it's not against the ground rules. By doing this, you help the child to understand the consequences or positive general effects of engaging in more positive behaviors as opposed to behaviors that others might find annoying. Again, not only does this apply to us as the adult, but there are times when a child is being annoyed by the behavior of another child. So again, with that child, you can try and focus their attention elsewhere. You can still try to redirect the behavior that is annoying or the child who is being annoyed to a different activity. And again, you can try and help that child who is being annoying to realize the negative impact that they're having on their classmates. And maybe that's a classmate that they really want to be friends with, and they're realizing, oh, well, when I do this, they don't appreciate that. Or maybe it's vice versa, that it is a classmate that they don't like, and now they are wanting to be annoying on purpose. So you want to make sure that you go back to the ground rules, that that is not respectful, that is not kind, that is not how we treat one another, and talk about potential natural or logical consequences that can be associated if this behavior continues on, if it is in fact happening on purpose. So sometimes appropriate guidance strategies is to ignore mildly annoying behavior, only when it's not against the ground rules. However, we must immediately interrupt any behavior when it is harmful physically or emotionally or unfair, going against those ground rules. Children rely on us to enforce rules and protect their individual rights. Children will be willing to follow rules only if they come to believe that those rules are meaningful. Consistency and fairness in the enforcement of rules helps children learn to trust authority figures. Behaviors that are harmful or unfair must be interrupted immediately by a responsible adult. Again, we have ground rules in place to protect the rights of children. And it is our job as the adult to make sure that we are enforcing them. They rely on us as the authority, as the bigger person, to enforce those. They will only follow the rules, and they will follow the rules when they see and they know that they are enforced, that the rules mean something, that they aren't something that's just up on a poster but is never enforced or never said or never explained. And they know that those rules are enforced consistently all the time. It's not when you're in the mood or not in the mood, when you're having a good day, when you've had your coffee, whatever it might be. You're always consistently enforcing those rules and expectations, and you are doing so fairly. You're not applying it to some children and not to other children. It is our job as the responsible adult leading a group of children who are going to grow up into adults to be consistent and fair. Children can be helped to resolve their own disagreements, but they must know that we will reliably stop unacceptable, hurtful behavior. Going back to the title of this slide, immediately interrupt, immediately stop behavior that is harmful or unfair. This does not mean immediately solve. It isn't necessarily our job as the adult to solve the problem of the child. If we do that, we aren't really helping them to become better people and to develop their own thought processes. But it is our job to immediately interrupt, and therefore we can help the child to resolve their own disagreements, their own issues. But they need to know that we are going to immediately interrupt or stop whatever is going against the rules. So how can we do this? We need to make sure when we do intervene that we are doing so as firmly as necessary, but as gently as possible. What the heck does that mean? As firmly as necessary means that we are maintaining our authority, that we do have a particular stern and firm tone of voice to know that we mean business. But we also are showing compassion. We're showing empathy. That way the children will still want to come to us when they have problems because they know, Miss Heidi, she is always firm. She is always holding me accountable, but I know that she cares about me and that she's going to listen to everything that I have to say, that she's not going to take sides. That's going to be part of maintaining objectivity. By being firm, we hold on to our power. We are the ones in charge of this group. But we are still gentle so that the children know that they can count on us, that we understand them, that we really do care. And we're doing this fairly by maintaining objectivity. We're not taking sides. We're listening to all of the parties that are involved. We're giving them each a time to speak. We're enforcing that we're not going to be interrupting one another when we're telling our side of the story, and we're going to get to a resolution. Additionally, a way to immediately interrupt behavior is to remove the child or the children from a problem situation. In the moment, if there's too much heated anger, then you revisit this problem at a calmer time, but it's still your job in the moment to interrupt the behavior that is going against the ground rules. When an upsetting occurrence happens, because there are going to be disagreements, there are going to be unpleasant circumstances, unpleasant situations. We are not always going to agree as humans and therefore as children. They're not always going to agree. But when this unpleasant situation occurs, we do need to make sure that we as the adult are addressing the situation squarely, firmly, honestly, gently still, allowing the child a chance to cooperate. If we don't give the child a chance to show us that they understand, a chance to show us that they're learning, we're cutting them off from the potential to grow socially and emotionally. However, we will have children who do not engage. And it's important, though, when the child chooses not to engage, to cooperate voluntarily, that we do not give in to this stall or this stalemate. Sometimes children do leave us no choice but to say, I've really tried talking to you and I've asked you several different ways if you want to write it down for me, if you want to draw me a picture, if you want to wait 5 minutes and then talk to me about what's going on, but you are just refusing to talk to me. So you're leaving me no choice but to have to call your parents or but to have to call the principal or to have to do a behavior report because you're not telling me your side. You're not letting me understand. So in a sense, you do reach a point where you have to reach an ultimatum of whatever consequences are next according to your program policy. So just because a child refuses to voluntarily cooperate doesn't mean that they get out of any consequences. So it is okay to remove a child from the problem situation in the moment to revisit it later, but it isn't okay for them to keep stalling and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. You need to use your best judgment to determine how much time can pass before this child should be willing to cooperate with you, and if they're still not, then you need to move forward in however is appropriate. In addition to making sure that you're intervening firmly but gently, you're maintaining objectivity, and that you remove a child immediately from a situation, there are other quick response techniques to handle behavior in the moment when it's happening that is against the ground rule. And these are quick response techniques to, again, immediately interrupt that behavior. First is to simply give undivided attention, whether that's making eye contact with the child. Maybe it's even just getting a little bit closer to where an activity is occurring. That's actually going to be more of a prevention technique, which we'll talk on the next slide, but it is still a quick response that you can do in the moment. Make eye contact. That way they know that you're watching them. Position your body at eye level to the child if you're going to have a discussion, if you're trying to gain their attention again. Use appropriate touch. With children, touch is always such a touchy subject. That pun was not intended, but it happened. And you need to use it wisely. One way that you can do this is to gently put your hand on the shoulder of the child, not to turn them towards you to force them in a different direction, but simply for them to realize, hey, I'm here, I'm talking to you, and make that eye contact again. Maybe even with the touch, they still don't make eye contact, so you move your own body to be in front of them. Don't ever force the child into moving their body into a situation unless it's to get them out of some type of danger. You have to be careful with appropriate touch. And also, simply use the name of the child as opposed to calling them, hey buddy, hey sweetie. Call them their name. That's going to get their attention when they hear their name being said. Oh, they're talking to me. Oh, they know my name. Someone knows my name. Oh, it is me that they're talking to, that something is wrong. Oh, I better go listen. Doesn't mean that they always care when you're saying their name, but those are quick response techniques in the moment to get their attention to immediately interrupt harmful or unfair behavior. Additionally, offer assistance. When you see something's going on, you see the tension that's building, walk up and say, hey guys, what's going on? How can I help? Is there anything I can do? And offer encouragement. If they're like, no, there's not, okay, well, let me know if you guys need any help. Looks like you guys have it under control. Or if they're asking for a specific help, maybe you then offer them the encouragement to handle it themselves. Oh, well, I really do think you can do this. What do you think you could do instead? Get them to reflectively think about what they can do and they can be in control of. Encourage them to then follow through and engage in that. Additionally, give choices. So if you're seeing a behavior and you need to immediately stop it, it's against the ground rules, you go up and you say, hey guys, you can use this ball to play soccer, or you can use this ball to play kickball, but those are our only two options. We're not using it to play handball. Would you like to play soccer? Would you like to play kickball with this ball? Or do you want to actually go get a handball to play handball? It's okay to give one or two, maybe three choices. Going beyond three can be a lot of choices for them to handle in a quick response type technique. And giving choices can lead into a longer response or a longer way of handling the behavior. But in the moment, quick ones to go up are give choices. This is your choice. That's your choice. I'm sorry. You want to do that? That's not one of your choices. You can do this or you can do that. If they still refuse to do one of those choices, then you are moving into a longer response technique. But you can at least try a quick response to see if that will immediately solve the problem. And again, as it said on the previous slide, a quick response technique is simply remove the child. Remove the child or remove the children if it is a handful of them, and give them the opportunity to talk about it. Hey, what's going on? So the talking about it part is going to take longer, but the quick response is move them away from whatever is going on. So alternatively, instead of immediately interrupting those harmful or unfair behaviors or having to use quick response techniques, we can also use prevention techniques. And it's always easier to prevent inappropriate or dysfunctional behavior than to stop it. So that's why these techniques are important. If we can stop the behaviors before they even happen, by, again, looking at our environment, looking at our schedule, looking at our curriculum. We can also do that in the techniques we do. This oven in itself is a technique, though. How do we prevent those problem behaviors? Because it is harder to deal with it in the moment. So some ways that we prevent it are to make sure that we are maintaining developmentally appropriate activities and environments. We talked about this before. Make sure the environment itself is appropriate. Make sure the activities or curriculum are appropriate. We also create a calm and stress-free surrounding. This, again, is intentional on our part by having a schedule, making sure that the children know and what is expected of them, what is required of them. We saw in one of our trainings creating like a calming corner, and this can be hard for us to do in our after-school programs, but one way that you can modify the use of a calming corner or a cool-down corner is to use a trifold poster board like that kids use to do science experiments or whatever science fairs projects that they have, and it's a trifold, so it'll stand up on its own, and you can easily fold that up, take it back and forth with you to your classroom that you borrow, and when you open it up, you have the different instructions on breathing techniques or calming techniques, different charts to point at how they're feeling if they're not able to verbally express how they're feeling because they're just so frustrated in that moment, whatever you might put in that calming corner, and then have a basket that has little fidgets that might go with it. But by doing that, by teaching the kids how to appropriately use that, that's a prevention technique. That's also going back to part of your curriculum. You're teaching those social and emotional skills, but you're doing it in a way that works for our after-school environments by making it portable. A prevention technique is also to simply observe children and to anticipate those problems before they happen. When you start to see the kids getting a little antsy, whether that's antsy negatively or they're getting super giggly and super funny, unfortunately, a lot of my experience is those kids that are just having a really good time, it goes from sweet to sour super fast. So I still kind of keep an eye on those kids that really do seem to be having a good time, just to help make sure that it maintains and stays that way. So observe children, make sure you are adequately supervising them both inside and outside of the classroom. Limit the space, limit the activities that are available if you need to do so because you can't adequately observe every area. So make sure that you can limit what you need to so you can observe students. Additionally, make sure you actually listen to the kids. So when you are intervening and you're needing to talk to them and you're hearing each side of their story, don't interrupt them unless it's to clarify what they are saying. Don't try to finish the story for them. Let them tell you their entire story. Don't let others' children interrupt them when they are telling their side of their story. Let each of them know that they will have their turn to speak, and if they don't agree with some part of someone else's story, they're still going to have their chance to tell their side of the story once it's their turn. Make sure you listen to them equally, fairly, and then follow through with whatever you're pulling away from what they're sharing with you. Additionally, a prevention technique, again, is to intentionally teach children to express their feelings appropriately. Children aren't going to magically do this. They aren't going to magically know how to work through their problems or to even express what they're feeling, to put words to what they are physiologically sensing in their body. So you have to teach them to use those words. You have to teach them the words that label those feelings that they are having, those physiological experiences, and you need to be intentional about doing it. Plan it. Do it on purpose. You also need to maintain a warm and friendly, optimistic attitude. If the children see you as always being negative, maybe it is that student that you're like, gosh, they're always in trouble. But you don't need them to sense that from you. They need to feel that they can always come to you with any questions that they have, because they know that you're one of their number one supports, especially in the after school environment, that they have someone that they can count on. And if you're closed off, if you're cold, they're not going to want to approach you in that case. Additionally, we talked last time about ourselves, about our communication. So make sure that you're expressing your requests in a positive manner rather than a negative manner. Also, make sure that you're focusing more on the positive overall. We tend to focus more on the negative. We tend to point out the negative. We tend to get focused because that's what's irritating us, and therefore that's what we're constantly pointing out. So instead, try to reframe and change what you focus on to focus on those positives, and then to sincerely recognize the children's progress and children's actions that are positive, that are what you want to see and what you want to see more of. Lastly, make sure you keep realistic expectations. If you have expectations that are far too high, that are maybe at an adult level, and you have to remember that you work with kids, you can end up being the one becoming overly frustrated, when all reality is that you shouldn't have been so frustrated to begin with. You shouldn't have expected the child to do this certain behavior. You shouldn't have expected them to be able to engage in this activity because they just didn't developmentally know how to do it. So this can go back to expecting children to express their feelings appropriately. You can't expect children to do that. They have to be taught how to do that. So keep realistic expectations. These are various prevention techniques, and prevention techniques are a form of guidance strategies. Another type of prevention technique, a specific strategy, is control of error. So a teaching strategy, it was originally developed by Maria Montessori, and it also can be known as self-correction. And it's simply that the materials themselves are designed to provide instant feedback to the child if they have made a mistake, not the adult. This isn't someone else outside of the child, it's materials outside of the child. Or the materials are also designed to make it impossible to make a mistake. By doing this, it puts the control in the hands of the learner, the student, the child, and it protects their self-esteem, their idea of whether or not they're worthy of doing something or not doing something, of earning something or not earning something. And it protects their self-motivation, their willingness to try something again, because they're less likely to make a mistake. So an example that I have here is glue bottles. When we have larger glue bottles, I've seen like the 4-ounce, the 8-ounce, the 12-ounce, the 16-ounce, you have the big gallon jug. If you want to control the amount of error, the amount of mistake that a child can make, don't give them a full gallon glue bottle when they really only need a couple dots to put on the back of their paper, or a couple lines to put around the edges of their paper. If you want to control the error, buy a gallon glue bottle to refill your other bottles, but only buy the 4-ounce. And even above that, don't fill the 4-ounce all the way up. Only put about half of it in. That way, if the child does squirt out all of the glue or the cap comes off, they didn't make as big of a mistake as they could have if you had given them the entire gallon of glue. So this can apply to various situations. Maybe it's being outside. Jump ropes is what's coming to mind right now. That if you have a certain number of children and you know that they're going to start to fight over jump ropes, make sure you have adequate amount of jump ropes. Or the control of error in terms of making a mistake. Make sure you intentionally teach them how to use the jump rope so that they can play with it appropriately. Kids are also still going to go and play with it inappropriately. They'll find ways, but that's when you need to go in and redirect as well. So control of error or self-correction is another type of prevention technique. Planning ahead and thinking of what could go wrong and figuring out how to prevent it from going wrong or to minimize the amount of going wrong. Additionally, we can adapt the objects, the materials. We can adapt whatever events we have planned, and we can adapt our attitudes to remove possible causes of behavior. What do we mean by this? Again, objects, we want to make sure that we are keeping them developmentally appropriate for the child. Events, we want to make sure that it's things that they're actually interested in. attitudes, going back to us and keeping realistic expectations, going into it and believing I'm going to have a good day today, I'm going to have fun, versus dreading, oh man, it's field day, I hate field day, it's just all this work out in the sun, whatever it might be. Changing your attitude as well, because children will feed off of those negative attitudes. By adapting, or by thoughtfully thinking about adapting, we can also ask the children, what would they like to do, or what could we do to help them change and make this more fun, to make this more interesting, and then make sure to actually follow through on that. Make sure that we are also persistently following up. Hey, I remember you guys made this suggestion for this game and we went ahead and changed it. We used, I don't know, hula hoops instead of bean bags for this game. Is it still fun? Do you still like it? Do you want to try something else? What do you think? Give me your feedback. And then again, follow through on those additional follow-ups on what can we change, what do you like, what did you not like. Additionally, make sure that you are explaining the natural or logical consequences of unacceptable behavior. You know, if we continue doing this, if we continue breaking the rule of being kind, then we're not going to be able to have the field day that we are going to do at the end of this month. That might be a logical consequence, because if I cannot trust you to not run around at the lunch area, how am I going to trust you to follow the rules of different games on field day? Explain that natural consequence. Adapt events. Maybe they don't get to do it, or maybe certain events are taken off the menu for that activity rather than canceling that activity altogether. Also, make sure that you're protecting the child's or children's dignity and privacy. So when you do have problem behavior and you do need to reprimand, you do need to have a discussion, do so privately. Don't put it on parade in front of everyone. When you need to follow up with the parents even, do so to the side. Don't do it to where everyone knows their kid got in trouble because you're having to talk to those parents. That not only is, again, protecting their privacy, but protecting their dignity, that, hey, we all make mistakes and we can all try again. Not calling them out necessarily in front of the classroom, or at least going back to the class as a whole and saying, yeah, what did they do, or what they did wasn't the best, we can change things, etc. What could we have done differently? How can we help them when they come back to the classroom? Maybe they had to be removed from the classroom and the class is all talking about it so they know. We can say, yeah, has anyone else ever made a mistake? Get them to realize, yeah, hey, we've all messed up. How did you want to be treated when you came back into the classroom? Protect that child's dignity. Make it a teachable moment as well for everyone without necessarily focusing on that individual child. Also, as the adult, be willing to start over. Be willing to forgive and forget. That's hard. It's a hard one to do, but you need to be willing to do it. You don't enjoy when someone holds something against you, and maybe it's very rightfully so that someone holds something against you, or that you hold something against someone, but that's more appropriate for adults who, quote unquote, know better. They only know better if they have been taught better, but if they haven't been taught better, do they really know better? And we're working with children, so children don't necessarily know better. We have to be willing to start over. We have to be willing to forgive, to move on, to try again, to give a fresh start each and every day that children come to our program. We can assertively shape positive behavior, and we can do so by teaching the ground rules. This is a guidance strategy. Be intentional about teaching those ground rules. Plan activities that teach the ground rules. Again, we can do this by actively role playing. We can have them act out what it feels like when your feelings get hurt and how you would prefer to be treated. We can have them act out an argument and how to solve those problems. We have to repeat ourselves. If you are not comfortable repeating yourself, or if you are going to get frustrated repeating yourself, then I encourage you not to work with children. It's not meant for everyone. You have to be comfortable repeating yourself. Reviewing those ground rules every day throughout the day is going to help them remember, oh yeah, I need to be kind. I need to do this. I need to do that. Those are the expectations. And it's going to help them to enforce that amongst themselves as well. Also, have intentional discussions about it. What did they like? What did they not like? What could we do differently? How did that make you feel? And put it in, again, into activities. It can be, rather than a formal discussion, it can be an activity where they're going to role play it out. but ultimately they are still self-reflecting on how that would make them feel or how they would like to be treated or how they would like someone to treat them in response to a negative behavior. Make sure that you also clarify your expectations. What we mean by this is often you have to clarify the difference between toys, tools, and weapons, and what is or is not allowed. Right now is not a time to play with toys, but it is okay for us to use tools, and we never have weapons here on campus. What do we mean by this? Sometimes it's homework time, and we are using a ruler or we are using a pencil. And the pencil somehow goes from being a writing utensil, a writing tool. The ruler somehow goes from being a straight edge that I'm using to draw or that I'm actually using to measure something to becoming a toy. Now I'm playing with it. Now I'm using it as a catapult, or now I'm using it as a weapon. Now I'm hitting people with my pencil or my ruler. Make sure that you clarify if you are going to use this tool as a toy, then it will be taken away. If you're going to use this tool as a weapon, then there might be a behavior reflection or talking to parents, whatever is appropriate for said behavior and for your program. Make sure you clarify when it's okay to use something as a toy. This spork we eat with when we're at the lunch table, but maybe it is allowed for them to use it as a digging tool in science club. So you can expect that, you know what? We are going to be using a spork today for our science activity. So it normally is a tool that is used for eating. But right now, you might think that it's a toy used for playing in our science activity. You could, however, avoid the toy conversation altogether by saying that it's still a tool, but you're using it in a different way now for a different purpose. But make sure you clarify when toys are acceptable versus when tools are required, and that weapons are never acceptable. Additionally, you always need to maintain consistency in whatever you decide and whatever your rules and expectations are and whatever your consequences are. Maintain that consistency. Why is consistency so important? Why has consistency come up a couple times throughout all of our videos, but also in today's video? Children learn positive ways of interacting with others when we can be consistent and persistent, not angry or impatient. We can avoid a great deal of irritation by recognizing that it takes time for children to absorb new skills and habits. Our task, our job, is to structure a consistent and predictable environment where children are allowed adequate periods to develop new skills, and we introduce those skills in tiny bite-sized bits. Children take time to absorb new skills and habits. Children are not going to develop any of these positive guidance strategies and techniques and ingrain them overnight. Remember, we have short-term goals and we have long-term goals. Long-term goals are a lifetime to develop. Children are going to need us to repeat things. Children are going to need to try things over and over again before they fully understand it or quote unquote get it right. If we are not consistent each time, if each time they engage in this annoying behavior, we respond differently. Sometimes we ignore it. Sometimes they move their clip down. Sometimes they do a reflection. Sometimes we call their parents. Sometimes they have a time away. If we are not consistent in our follow through, or at least explaining why it was different one time, I tried ignoring the behavior that you were doing, but now it's not just bothering me, it's bothering your table mates. If this continues, then I will need you to move your clip down. Explain why before they didn't get in trouble and now they are. If you're not consistent in one child to another child, the kids are watching you constantly and they're seeing how you're interacting with other students in their group and in the program as a whole. If you're not consistent, they are not going to trust you as the authority figure. Consistency is key to positive child guidance. Thank you for watching. Behavior Guidance Part 3.4. I hope you guys found something within this video series informational and beneficial. If you have any questions or comments, do not hesitate to leave them in the comments below.